How much do you like your job? Most people would say not a lot, right? Wrong. Actually, a Gallup poll found that the number of Americans who say they are completely satisfied with their work has risen from 41% in 2001 to 55% in 2019. And in 2020, 89% said that they were either completely or somewhat satisfied. That's a lot of people. Given that we spend most of our waking lives at work, it's not surprising that there is a growing body of scientific and academic work on the topic of happiness at work. Indeed, these statistics come from an article called The Secret to Happiness at Work by Arthur Brooks, who has devoted his life to understanding how private industry can help lift people out of poverty, the science of happiness, and job satisfaction. Brooks is the William Henry Bloomberg Professor at the Practice of Public Leadership at Harvard Kennedy School and Professor of Management Practice at the Harvard Business School. He is also the author of 11 books. But before all that, he had dropped out of college at age 19 to pursue his love of classical music. I imagine, therefore, he knows a thing or two about the pursuit of happiness. His work goes beyond the usual corporate buzzwords and aims to give people hands-on tools to improve their happiness at work. He agreed to talk to me today about workplace satisfaction, the implications of his research for the role of the insurance industry in making people happier, and what it means for people who work at Generali. I'm Jennifer Clark. I am a journalist, and I've always been passionate about great stories. This is a story that is 190 years old. It is the story of Generali and how it has always been a life partner for its clients, for global communities, and for those who are in need, with a spirit of constant innovation and sustainability. It's a story that comes a long way into the future. This is 190 Years of Future. Episode 8, Believe in the Future. Okay, so welcome, Professor Brooks. My name is Jennifer Clark. So you and I were both born in the United States, which is one of the few countries that enshrines the pursuit of happiness in its credo. Isn't this a little bit strange? The French Revolution, which was based on similar principles, had liberty, equality, and fraternity as its motto. What do you think the Founding Fathers meant by that?
Well, Thomas Jefferson, he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but it wasn't very original. He actually took the language from an earlier document, which was called the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And that had three promises, which were life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. And when he was basically copying that document, he thought about it a little bit, and he thought the pursuit of property didn't sound quite right because of what he knew about this American population, almost entirely made up of immigrants. So he changed it to the pursuit of happiness. And this was very radical, of course, still is. And he was asked later, why did you write the pursuit of happiness? And he said that he was simply taking dictation from the American mind, which I think is very beautiful as far as it goes, because I think that the concept, not just an American concept, but a human concept that we have the right, the natural right to build our lives from wherever we find it, is part of the experience of human striving. And that's the kind of life I want to live too.
You're currently professor of management practice at the Harvard Business School, where you teach a course called Leadership and Happiness. You talk about what you call the science of happiness. Like, can happiness be a science? And of course, how do you define happiness for the purpose of your work?
Social scientists and neuroscientists have found that human happiness is something that we really can study, but to do so, we have to understand that it's like studying a nutritious meal. So happiness is really indistinct because that's just like saying dinner. But then if you say, what are the macronutrients behind dinner, then you can really get someplace. The component parts of happiness are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning or purpose. But we don't get enjoyment until we put a little human work, a little bit of effort into it. So, alcohol gives pleasure, but good wine, when we understand it, brings pleasure. Music can bring sort of an animal level of pleasure, but enjoyment comes when we learn more about music. And so enjoyment is one of the first components of having a good and happy life. The second is satisfaction. The satisfaction is a reward for a job well done. It's the reward we get for attaining a goal. And that's actually the most elusive parts of happiness, because as the Rolling Stones always saying, I can't get no satisfaction. The truth is, you can get it, but it's really hard to keep. And this is one of the things that the science of happiness is most interested in, is how to get and keep lasting satisfaction. And the last is meaning. Meaning, or the sense of purpose in life. This is the most paradoxical parts of happiness, this macronutrient of happiness, because to understand meaning, the meaning of life, you actually have to suffer. Nobody ever says, I truly understood the meaning of my life that week I went to Ibiza. They talk about things that happened that were a challenge to them, the things that they had to get over.
Thank you. So how can business executives benefit from a course in happiness, or from your course in happiness?
I started teaching the course Leadership and Happiness at the Harvard Business School because one of the things that I've learned in my studies and as a scholar of happiness is that to be truly happy, you have to do three things. Number one, you need to understand happiness, to work for it and understand it. It's not just enough to wish you were happy. There's actually research that shows that people who say, I wish I were happier, tend to get unhappier. But the people who work for it, they really do get happier by starting to understand some of the basic facts and science behind it. That's step one, understanding. Step two is application. You have to practice it. You have to take what you learn and change things you're doing in your life, to find the mistakes that you're making and to get better at the parts that you need to reinforce. And the last, which is actually the most important, is you have to share these things. You have to teach what you learn. And the reason for this is because, like any other feeling that you'd have, or any other emotion-based sensation that you have, if it just happens to you, you can't do very much with it. But if you actually understand it, if you try to manage it by moving it into the front part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, then you can really do a lot. You can make it better. So when I work with business executives, I'm saying, look, you're happiness teachers. It's not just me. You have to learn what I'm teaching, and you need to go teach it.
Let's leave aside happiness for a moment and delve a little bit deeper into the origins of your work. I listened to your TED Talk, and that was really interesting, and you said it grows out of an obsession with the causes of poverty. And your first book, Who Really Cares, was focused on philanthropy and giving. So what is your view about corporate philanthropy and programs like Generali's Human Safety Net? What can companies do in this space to lift people out of poverty?
I've been involved in public policy for almost my entire career. And I think public policy is incredibly important, which is to say government policy for lifting people out of poverty, for helping people at the margins of society in our countries and in places all around the world. But public policy is not the only way that we can help others. On the contrary, the greatest engine against poverty in the history of civilization is the free enterprise system. And in point of fact, the idea of creating companies and jobs and growth and opportunity, that's really what pulls people out of poverty. It all comes from companies like Generali, full of people who are working hard every single day. And we need to empower people inside these companies to do more, to be able to create more jobs and more growth and opportunity, and to give them the freedom to do so. But it's also the case that people working in these companies are not just doing it because they want profits. They're also doing it because they want a better world. On the contrary, it's an opportunity for us to be fully alive in our jobs and to express our most important moral sentiments through our work and through our jobs. And this is why I admire so much when I see companies like Generali doing things like the Human Safety Net. The reason that Generali can do that is because it's a very successful 190-year-old company, truly one of the greatest worldwide companies, and very profitable at that, and can pay people more than adequately, and so that they can support their families, which is a wonderful thing, and have enough left over that they can engage in activities that exhibit the moral ideas of the people who work for Generali and for their communities and customers. And so basically, it's just a huge win-win.
Why now is the shift to focusing on gross national happiness? A concept maybe from Bhutan. You wrote a book about it in 2008. Why? Why is this happening, and what are the benefits to businesses like Generali from this shift?
So for the longest time, the only way that we really knew how to measure the success of an economy was by looking at GDP, at how it grew, how it changed, how it compared to other countries. But we all kind of knew that was a pretty inadequate measure. And the reason is because none of us individually thinks about our own well-being in terms of the paycheck. I certainly don't. I mean, there are lots and lots of people who want to make more money, to be sure, but the reason they want to make more money is because they want to be able to spend more time with their families, or they want to be more secure. They want to retire in a way where they're not worried, that sort of thing. They're not thinking about the money as happiness per se, not even as a measure of happiness. We don't do that personally, but we tend to do that in terms of our countries. And, people define happiness in different ways in different countries at different times, et cetera. What it does indicate, however, is that happiness matters to people. And so what we need to do is to find better ways to not just to measure, but to appreciate human thriving outside of the purely GDP kind of measures. In some way, we're struggling toward these things. Some of the European countries have done that. The UK and France have done that. Certainly in the tiny Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan, they have gone to measuring gross national happiness, which is something, as you mentioned, that I've written about and a lot of other people have written about.
Okay, so let me just interrupt you here a bit. Honing in even more closely on business, I'd like to talk about insurance at this point. You've quoted the French philosopher François Ewald saying, "Insurance liberates man from fear." Is there any scientific research linking insurance to well-being or happiness?
It turns out there's one industry in particular that's most intimately linked in the research to consistent augmentation of human happiness, and that's insurance. Why? Well, the reason for it is that one of the great sources of unhappiness in life is fear. Fear is this primal, basic negative emotion that's processed by the limbic system of the brain. And by the way, fear is a great gift. Fear is the reason that we're all alive today. That the fact is that it's the master emotion insofar as fear occupies more tissue in the human brain than any other emotion. But there's lots and lots of reasons that we should be attuned to fear to protect ourselves. The problem is it's unpleasant. If it were pleasant, then fear wouldn't keep us alive. So one of the components of fear is to make us not want it, to the sources of fear to go away. And that's actually how we protect ourselves. There's a whole part of the brain called the limbic system in which there's a subcomponent called the amygdala, which basically lights up like a Christmas tree in response to stimuli that are scary to you. You see a car speeding toward you down the street and about to hit you, and in 74 milliseconds, your amygdala will light up and send an electrical signal through the hypothalamus of your brain to the pituitary gland, which will send a signal to your adrenal glands down by your kidneys to pump out stress hormones. The problem is that it's maladapted to modern life. And, modern life, which is full not just of fear, back in, 500,000 years ago, fear was something that happened very suddenly and in a very concentrated way. But in modern life, that's not what we have. We don't have extreme fear very often. We don't think that a saber-toothed tiger is going to come around the corner. Rather, we have kind of chronic fear, which is not what our system is adapted for. That's generally speaking called uncertainty. Uncertainty is what happens to us when we don't know what might happen, which could be catastrophic or it might not be. It's just kind of a chronic nagging uncertainty, which is a form of fear, which gives us a lot of stress. So since it's maladapted to modern life, the way that we're experiencing fear, we need new mechanisms to neutralize it that are outside our brains. And one of the ways that we've done that is insurance. The insurance business, by the way, which is not that old, it's only a few hundred years that people have figured out that they can neutralize the uncertainty of their lives by just simply turning it into risk.
So what are the implications for people working in the insurance business?
People in the insurance industry, they need to be able to explain that Uncertainty is terrible, and risk isn't terrible. Risk is normal. Risk is bearable. You take risks every day. You go get in your car and you drive to work. That's a risk. That's a calculated risk, and you more or less understand the risk. That's number one. Number two, it's important for people in the insurance industry to understand that they are agents for happiness. I mean, they deserve to understand that. And I don't think that executives often enough tell their agents, for example, that, thank you for making a happier world. And then finally, on the marketing and communications end, people often think marketing and communication is all about just, tricking people out of their money. That's wrong. Marketing and communication, this is really about the dissemination of truthful information. Marketing at its best is helping people understand the good things that can happen. Now, for sure,
Generali's corporate purpose is to enable people to shape a safer future by caring for their lives and dreams. How can agents go beyond just dealing with risk to make a more positive impact on their customers' lives? Is there any way they can go beyond what you just described?
One of the things that we know about agents who are in sales that they do the best is when they have a deep understanding of the what's going on in people's lives. And so just listening at a very deep level about what it is that they care about. Because once you tell me what you care about the most, then I can tell you what you're most afraid of. It's funny, love and fear are cognitive opposites. They're psychological opposites. People think that love and hate are opposites. They're not. Fear is the ultimate negative emotion, and love is the ultimate positive emotion. And one of the things that we know is that the best way, if you have a lot of fear in your life, to get rid of it is to have more love. And so if an agent says to a customer, tell me what you value the most in your life, and they start talking about their children, they talk about their spouse, they talk about their family, they talk about their community, then you're going to be able to say, those are the things that we most need to protect.
You've written that insurance professionals are in an enviable position. How is that so?
Well, I think a lot of times when I'm talking to business executives, they'll confess to me that one of the greatest sources of frustration in their life is that they've worked, 60, 80 hours a week. And, they're 50 years old or 60 years old, and they say, what have I been working for? In insurance business, you never have to ask that question. There's never the hint that what you're doing is at odds with the general good of the population. We talked earlier about corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy and the human safety net that Generali is doing. Well, the human safety net is just another version of what Generali is doing in its day-to-day work. I mean, the insurance business is the human safety net. It just is. And then doing something that you would call the human safety net that is based on corporate philanthropy, that's just icing on the cake. That's just extra.
Before we say goodbye, Professor Brooks, I'd like to ask you if you have any practical suggestions for people who work in the insurance industry.
I'll make a very tangible suggestion. If you're an executive at Generali, someplace in the world, go on the internet and download a picture of the German floods that happened in 2021. And there's pictures all over the internet of Generali agents that are showing up, adjusters that are showing up, and the look on the faces of the people in those towns is probably the first time in 2 weeks that they were happy. Now think about that. Bringing happiness to people, a real person who lost his house. That's a big deal. Most people, they can't deliver that ever in their lives. And an insurance adjuster can do that. And the executive who supervises the adjuster is doing that. So go to the internet and get that picture and download it and print it and cut it out and tape it to the bottom of your computer screen. And each day, before you start your job, say, I don't know what this day is going to bring. Everything I do today, I'm doing for the person in this picture and also the people I can't see. And I'm truly grateful to have a job where I can create this happiness.
This conversation with Professor Brooks was really inspiring for me. It makes me want to look for a photograph of a journalist to put on my computer to motivate me and remind me of how lucky I am to do this fantastic job. And talking about happiness, job satisfaction, and finding a purpose in work seems like a great way to end this podcast, exploring Generali's 190 years of history. We've talked to a lot of people and heard a lot of stories. It's been a fascinating journey for me, and I hope for you too. You have been listening to 190 Years of Future, a podcast written by me, Jennifer Clark, and realized by Cora Media for Generali. The account producer is Anna Nenna. Research by Antonella Sarecchia. Editorial supervision by Sara Poma for Cora Media. Recording and sound design by Frigo Studio.